I'm Elisa Parenti in Washington, and you're watching Bloomberg Technology. Let's start with a check of your first word news. President Trump took a victory lap before an admiring crowd at the annual Conservative Political Action Conference. He also warned that U.S. constitutional rights will be in jeopardy if the Democrats regain control of Congress.
They will take away those massive tax cuts, and they will take away your Second Amendment. By the way, if you only had a choice of one, what would you rather have, the Second Amendment or the tax cuts? Go ahead. Second Amendment, tax cuts. Second Amendment. I'm going to leave it at the Second Amendment. I don't want to get into that battle, all right?
The White House says it is currently reviewing recommendations from the Pentagon about transgender service members in the U.S. military. The president proposed banning them from serving last summer. He also tasked the Pentagon to come up with a plan to handle openly transgender soldiers. Former Trump campaign aide Rick Gates pled guilty to federal conspiracy and false statements charges. He pleaded not guilty in October when he was first indicted by special counsel Robert Mueller. Gates' former boss, Paul Manafort, maintains his innocence. His charges were revised after Gates' plea. Global news 24 hours a day, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Elisa Parenti, and this is Bloomberg.
I'm Emily Chang, and this is Bloomberg Technology. Coming up, Dropbox files and leads the charge for big tech IPOs in 2018. Our look at the game plan and the players involved in the storage provider's public listing. Plus, Amazon's brick-and-mortar craze. The e-commerce giant makes another play for the struggling convenience store industry with plans to open more cashless stores. And the next round officially begins in the fight for the future of the internet. We will go inside the massive opposition mobilizing against the FCC's plan to end net neutrality. But first, to our lead. After months of speculation, in fact, years of speculation, Dropbox has made it official by filing for a U.S. IPO. Dropbox aims to raise $500 million. That number, though, is a placeholder that is likely to change. With the storage provider valued at $10 billion in its 2014 funding round, we could be looking at one of the biggest U.S. tech IPOs in recent years. For more, I want to welcome Bloomberg Deal reporter Alex Barinka, who's been following this story, and Malik of True Ventures, who hasn't been on the show in a while. Great to have you back. Alex, let's start with the numbers. Of course, they raised at a $10 billion valuation a few years ago, but they're more likely to target like a $7 or $8 billion valuation now. What did we learn from this filing?
What we're looking at this filing are confirming some of the numbers they laid out, that they're cash flow positive, that they have 500 million users. But when I start digging deeper in terms of what investors will be looking at, yes, that $1.1 billion revenue number looks great. But when I dig into the user number specifically, 500 million registered users is a number that was thrown out in March of 2016. But only 11 million of those users, only 2% are paying users. And when I think about what investors are really going to be kind of grappling with as they decide whether or not to buy into this IPO, is the big question that Dropbox has continued to have. They have all of these free users. How do you get them to open their pocketbooks and actually pay the company for the products that it's providing?
And in fact, revenue growth is slowing, but losses are narrowing. What is your take?
I think we have to look at the other storage provider, which is Box, and it's not very different. The numbers are exactly the same. They have about 2% of their user base is paying users, and same as with Dropbox, so no big surprise here. I would say that the big challenge for them is to convince more people to pay for this. That is not an easy task, but it's also not an impossible thing, mostly because the wind is on their back. All trends are leading towards more demand for online storage. Yes, there is more competition. There is Google, there is Apple, and there is, Box itself. So we will see those challenges keep coming up. But in reality, people love Dropbox. The ease of use of Dropbox trumps a lot of stuff Google and Apple have to offer.
I remember when you came on and Box had filed for its IPO, and you didn't have a very positive outlook for Box. Do you think Dropbox will fare any better, or are they really about the same?
I think when I came on and I said the stock is going to be a bit challenged, and it has been challenged, and I don't think Dropbox is going to be any different. The stock will be challenged because, the growth isn't going to be that easy for them. Just like it hasn't been easy for Box. I mean, I didn't say it was a bad company. It just was a lot of challenges ahead for them.
Look, tell me about the risk factors.
And when I do look at the risk factors, competition is one of them. And the interesting point on Box is Dropbox is trying to distance itself from them. It flags Apple, Amazon, Google, Microsoft as its lead competitors and says it only kind of runs head-to-head with Box a little bit. And the co-founders had a really interesting line in their shareholder letter, basically some fighting words being thrown out saying they are at scale, they are moving quickly, they have a lot less baggage than the incumbents, and they said the incumbents were designed for a world where the most important thing you ever did was print something out. So Dropbox is trying to distance themselves. The question is, will investors be able to buy into kind of this vision of teamwork and collaboration and cloud-based workspaces that Dropbox is laying out to potentially distance itself from Box?
Right. So far, all their efforts to be a workspace haven't worked, right? Like, so all the paper and, they started the mail application. None of those
things. A carousel, a photo app.
It is a storage company. You can dress it up any which way you want. It's still a storage company. It is fighting Amazon, which offers free storage with its Prime. It's fighting with Apple, which has an easy conversion for people to buy Apple storage because they're on their device. Same is with Google. Google Drive and Google Docs are an easy upsell. The only thing going for Dropbox is people actually love using Dropbox. That counts for a lot in my books, but it doesn't count for a whole lot of more than that.
The brand and the recognition of that. This could be the largest IPO, tech IPO since Snap. What else is in the pipeline, Alex, for this year?
Spotify, obviously not an IPO, but a direct listing is one that we're paying attention to. And there does seem to be a lot of kind of movement on the ground. As I've been out here in San Francisco, people talking about bake-offs, people talking about listing, as the markets have had a bit of turmoil, but enough stability that advisors are still saying go public when you're ready. So those companies, as well as a number of kind of the bigger enterprise names, are the ones that I would pay attention in the pipeline. But again, Dropbox is going to be one that folks are going to pay attention to because it has those decent financials, some slowing revenue, some things that investors aren't going to like, but it is kind of indicative of a big version of what the bread and butter tech enterprise IPO typically looks like.
All right, Alex Brinka, our deals reporter, thank you. Malik, partner at True Ventures, you're sticking with me for a few more blocks. Now, we have some breaking news on Warren Buffett. He will retire from the board of Kraft Heinz following the end of his term at the company's upcoming annual shareholder meeting. Buffett decided to retire as he decreases his travel commitments. And remember, in his annual letter to shareholders, Berkshire Hathaway shareholders, that comes this Saturday. Coming up, it has been a week of chaos for social media platforms. A fake news and bots crisis is unfolding after videos and tweets emerge labeling a Parkland, Florida teen as a crisis actor. And if you like Bloomberg News, you can check us out on the radio, listen on the Bloomberg Radio app, Bloomberg.com, and in the U.S. on SiriusXM. This is Bloomberg. Tencent is acquiring 6% of Chinese mall operator Better Life Commercial for 887 million yuan, translating to about $140 million. JD.com will buy 5% of Better Life as part of the deal. The move is part of a larger brick-and-mortar retail move in a race against rival Alibaba. Both companies are investing in physical retail to ramp up adoption of its digital wallet. Well, social media companies like Facebook and Twitter have been in the hot seat for some time now, and the problems continue to pile on. Just a week ago, U.S. Special Counsel Robert Mueller unveiled the details of a widespread campaign by Russians to influence the U.S. presidential election in favor of Donald Trump. 13 Russians were indicted, and since then, these social networks have been facing backlash from the tragic school shooting in Parkland, Florida. Twitter is now verifying accounts of some of the outspoken student survivors of the Parkland shooting. Facebook and YouTube removed some of the conspiracy videos, claiming that survivor David Hogg was a paid actor. Here to wrap our heads around this chaos, True Ventures partner Malik and Bloomberg Tech's Selena Wang. So first of all, Selena, bring us up to date on the latest today. I mean, every day there is something new and some news new sort of problem for these companies to deal with.
Absolutely. I think the aftermath of the Parkland shooting just shows how vigilant the social media companies need to be about managing their systems and making sure that they rid them of automated bots and malicious fake accounts. We're seeing that every time there's a tragic event, anytime there's any breaking news, and these malicious actors find a window to promote divisive content, to push conspiracy theories, they will take every chance they can do to get it. And the results of this week show that these social media companies haven't solved their problems yet.
You know, you have been, I know, really following closely the evolution of social media, the evolution of sentiment towards social media. It seems like the tide is really turning against Facebook, turning against Twitter.
Well, I think we like to think that the tide is turning against them. You know, the normals haven't really reacted as much to the social media as the media itself and the so-called 1%. I'm being very candid about that. Most people outside of the bubble we live in don't really care.
But that's the problem, isn't it?
I do. Whether it's a problem or it's not a problem, I can't define, but I can tell you these companies, whether it is Twitter or Facebook or any other company, is driven primarily by one motivation, that is revenue. They cannot be thinking about cleaning up their feeds first. They're thinking about revenue first. And when you start to, parse that statement, you think this is not as important to them, cleaning up their feeds or looking for trolls or looking for fake news. That's not very important, because if they start doing that, then they are declaring themselves as editorial operations, and they will come under the same rules and regulations and ethics of a media company.
What do you think the intentions are? Are the intentions
of
good or bad?
Of
the people running Facebook, the people running Twitter,
the
and YouTube.
The intentions are to deliver growth for their shareholders. That is primarily the goal. There is no other way to think about these companies. These are publicly traded, listed companies in the business of making money. And unfortunate as it is, that is the harsh reality of these companies.
Facebook has been making changes to what it shows to advertisers. There was some new dribble about, actual versus estimated metrics. Tell us about that.
Absolutely. They've been focused on transparency for their advertisers, making sure that they tell them what's estimated and what's the actual return that they're getting from their investments. But I think that makes a great point that at the end of the day, what they're maximizing for is advertising revenue. And so that inherently makes the experience not driven for consumers, but driven for advertisers. And oftentimes the clickbait divisive material is what makes it to the top of the feed. I actually recently spoke with Roger McNamee from Elevation, who's been on the show before, and he suggests that the only way to change this fundamental issue is if Facebook were to be a subscription model, because only in that case would its incentives change.
Yeah.
But it seems highly unlikely that would ever happen.
Would that ever happen?
I don't think so. You know what? If you want a change in Facebook or Twitter or Google, actually go after their advertising operations and regulate those, not the companies themselves, but regulate how they use data, how they collect data, and what they do with it. I think doing so will lead to better policies in managing the chaos we have on social platforms.
I want to talk to you about your thoughts on the Mueller indictment, because on one hand, you could look at it and say it absolves Facebook of responsibility. The fact that, much of the ads were purchased after the election, and that these people actually used fake identities to quite masterfully circumvent, anything in the Facebook process that would have caught them.
I think when I saw the indictment, I said, wow, this is the greatest testimonial for two entities. One is Internet Research Agency being the best advertising agency in the world to actually deliver what they promised to their customers, which is Trump election, right? And the second is actually Facebook works as it promises it will work. You can hyper-target individuals and create and change their behavior. I think fundamentally, if you are going to create a system for such granular and nano-level targeting and micro-targeting, you will be a platform which is open to abuse.
Facebook Vice President on the ads team, Rob Goldman, published a series of tweets where he said he was excited about the Mueller indictment and then went on to share some facts that he feels are misunderstood about how this all worked, tweeting, "The majority of the Russian ad spend happened after the election. We shared that fact, but very few outlets have covered it because it doesn't align with the main media narrative of Trump and the election." The president then retweeted this, pointing out that even Facebook doesn't believe there was collusion. What do you think about Rob Goldman speaking, whether or not it was out of turn, speaking about this on Twitter, and not Facebook, by the way?
First of all, not out of turn. This is a very carefully thought out media strategy. This was with the blessing of media people and senior management at Facebook. There is no way they would.
That's your theory.
They would fire a contractor for speaking out of turn with a roommate. And you mean to say that they will let a senior vice president of advertising make such a fiery statement publicly without approval from the senior management? I don't think so. Good news is I don't do what you guys do, which is I'm no longer in the media business. But I think Facebook has the best media organization, best PR team, and they know how to spin the stories in their favor, and they do it very effectively. So I'm very cautious of whatever comes out of the Facebook spokespeople. That's just me.
Interesting. Well, I happen to think that they sort of shot themselves in the foot with that tweet. And obviously, they couldn't have foreseen Donald Trump retweeting it to basically say that the Mueller indictments are saying that he's absolved from any sort of Russian influence in having him win the election. But obviously, as Om said, they have a very sophisticated media strategy. Facebook is obviously trying to say that this operation was so much more sophisticated than we could have ever imagined. And its target was much broader than simply Donald Trump. It was about creating social discord in society at large. Unfortunately, by the time he got to that point, his initial tweets had already been retweeted so many times that his follow-up statement that we need to do more about this was already drowned out.
All right, Selena Wang of Bloomberg Tech, thanks so much. Om Malik, you're sticking with me. We're going to dig into this a little bit more later in the show, talk about tech addiction and more. Coming up, further disruption by Amazon in the brick and mortar scene, how the tech giant will roll out 6 more Amazon Go stores next. This is Bloomberg. Amazon plans to open as many as 6 more cashierless stores this year, this according to Recode. The e-commerce giant is considering locations in LA and hometown Seattle, where the first Amazon Go store opened last month. Amazon Go is the company's most ambitious effort to change the way people shop and a play for the struggling $550 billion U.S. convenience store industry. Still with us, Om Malik, True Ventures partner. How optimistic are you about these Amazon Go stores?
Well, I'm actually pretty impressed by what they've built. Clearly we are lagging behind in these kind of, cashierless experiences. The Japanese and the Chinese have been doing it for a little while, so we get very surprised to see it in our backyard. I do think that, this puts I think in reality this is pressure on big chains like, Walgreens and CVS and, folks like Walmart. I think our 7-Eleven, those are the folks who will actually be under, pressure from this decision of Amazon.
Right. So how do you think Amazon is really going to change the brick and mortar experience? I mean, not just with these convenience stores, but also with, their grocery efforts, though Walmart is still the leader in online grocery.
Well, Amazon is all about frictionless shopping, and cashierless stores are as frictionless as you can get. You don't have to talk to anybody, don't have to stand in a checkout line. You can in and out pretty fast. You monetize way faster, per square foot. Your returns are much higher. So in theory, it makes a lot of sense. Of course, it does a huge damage to the civic infrastructure of a city. You don't have as many people working at these stores, and cities become very homogeneous and polarized in economic sense. So I think that's definitely going to be an issue, but it will be an interesting next 5 years for the retail industry, which frankly has been dragging its feet in terms of innovation.
We've been railing on Facebook, we've been railing on Google, we've been, talking about Apple and, the disappointing iPhone 10 sales. Amazon seems to have a halo around it right now. What do you think Amazon's Achilles heel is?
I think, their problem will be with the regulators, and the antitrust bodies will be looking at them very carefully. And they should, because Amazon is probably the scariest of them all right now.
Why?
They have their hands in everything. Like they have, hands in the entire digital infrastructure with Amazon Web Services, now with the retail stores. They're building their own logistics systems. They're defining what brands succeed in terms of market, like who is going to sell more products will happen on the Amazon.com. There is no way Amazon and Apple, kiss and make up without Apple needing to sell more, HomePods and Apple TVs and stuff on the Amazon.com. So I think that's their biggest challenge is regulation. And I don't know why people think Apple is doing poorly. I think it's doing great. It's like a great company doing great work, and building products it knows how to build and selling them in a lot of volume. And same goes for Facebook. Facebook is selling a lot of ads, a huge amount of ads. We may hate them, we may dislike them, but they are selling a lot of ads and doing right by their shareholders.
We've actually had guests on recently who say that Amazon could at some point in the next few years surpass Facebook in online advertising, with Google still remaining on top.
I would not know how to answer that question, to be honest. I think with WhatsApp and Instagram hardly monetized, Facebook definitely has a lot more room to grow.
So of these companies then, which one are you most worried about?
Nobody.
Nothing's going to change.
They're just very highly efficient tools of capitalism. The machines are working so effectively in creating a lot of money. If there was one company, if you were to twist my arm and force me to pick one, I think it would be Google.
Why?
Because Google has severe addiction to one business model, which is search and advertising based on search. And unless they can figure out, how to expand that revenue model, it would be difficult.
All right, Al Malik, partner at True Ventures, you are sticking with me. Thanks for not making me twist your arm. You twisted it yourself. Coming up, we'll talk about the growing dangers of tech addiction and what's being done to curb screen time, particularly for children. This is Bloomberg.
I'm Elisa Parenti in Washington, and you're watching Bloomberg Technology. Here's a check of your first word news. Florida Governor Rick Scott has proposed tightening his state's gun laws following increasing public pressure in the wake of the high school shooting.
We will require all individuals purchasing firearms to be 21 or older. Let me repeat. We will require all individuals purchasing firearms to be 21 or older. There will be exceptions for active duty and reserve military and spouses, National Guard members, and law enforcement.
Governor Scott also called for a trained law enforcement officer for every 1,000 students at every school in Florida before the start of next year's school year. President Trump says he'll let Chief of Staff John Kelly decide whether to let Jared Kushner keep his interim security clearance. Kushner, the president's son-in-law and senior advisor, is among dozens of White House aides who have been working without permanent security clearances for the better part of a year. And President Trump said he would consider rejoining the Trans-Pacific Partnership if the U.S. could negotiate more favorable terms. He spoke at the White House during a joint news conference with Australian Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull. Trump noted he prefers bilateral deals to multi-nation agreements. The number of European citizens looking to live and work in Britain is falling ahead of Brexit. Figures released this week show net migration. That's the difference between those coming into Britain from elsewhere in the European Union and those leaving is less than 100,000 for the first time since 2013. In New Delhi, India and Canada today exchanged agreements for cooperation in the security, trade, and education sectors. At a joint press conference with Indian counterpart Narendra Modi, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau called India a natural partner and trusted friend for commercial cooperation.
A renewed economic partnership must create jobs and help families get ahead. As governments, we have the responsibility to set the right parameters for economic relationships to flourish in a way that benefits everyone, not just the wealthiest few.
Trudeau has drawn criticism during his trip to India over Canada's perceived softness on Sikh extremism. Global news 24 hours a day, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Elisa Parenti. This is Bloomberg, and more of Bloomberg Technology with Emily Chang is straight ahead.
Bloomberg Technology, I'm Emily Chang. Over the last few months, more people have been calling out the dangers of tech addiction, especially for children. Now, USA Today is reporting that almost half of American parents believe their children are addicted to mobile devices, according to a new survey from Common Sense Media and SurveyMonkey. Still with us, Ol Malik, partner at True Ventures. I want to back up a little bit and talk about sort of the bigger picture around Facebook and something that you have said to me, which is that you think Facebook is a net negative for the world, but that doesn't mean anything is going to change. Explain.
So I sent out a tweet a few days ago asking people if Facebook was a net negative for Silicon Valley and technology industry, and 52% people said yes. There was like 600 votes on that, so not too many. What I was trying to say is that Facebook is not a good citizen of Silicon Valley. Not only it has compromised data and privacy policies, which again embolden other people to follow them as a senior entity in Silicon Valley. They don't really buy companies at high valuation. They copy.
WhatsApp was $20 billion.
Yeah, well, that was like they didn't have, Google was buying WhatsApp. That's why they reacted to it. And same was with Instagram. Just to be clear, they are not a net plus to the system. They are hiring people at inflated salaries, causing housing problems. They're causing issues around. I mean, it is. People don't think about them in that sense, but it really is. It's the lightning rod which is driving up all sorts of valuations for funding. They're making people raise more money, spend more money to hire more people. They are creating this competition for talent. Which is fine. That is. But,
so is Google.
Yeah, that is capitalism, and I think that's just fine.
It's so hard for startups.
But they don't give back anything to the community. Nothing. All they do is take from it. The way they have gone out and copied Snap and destroyed Snapchat's, ideas and like features and growth strategy. That shows you how negative they are overall. Again,
let's talk about
that's also capitalism, right? But what I'm saying is that Google was always trying to contribute back to the ecosystem. Facebook doesn't. Yeah. It's all about. It's just they suck everything in.
What about the product? And you saying it's also a net negative, not just for tech, but for the world?
Yeah, it is. I think it just is a great tool to suck up data and sell advertising. They want to control our attention and sell advertising.
What about the connecting the world?
Oh, please.
More meaningful connections?
I wrote a piece recently, proving that more data and more attention, they have more data Facebook makes. They are not in the business of connecting the world. They're in the business of collecting as much data to make as much money by selling advertising. That's what Facebook is all about. That's why it's a net negative. It doesn't improve our lives in any which way. It did maybe 3-4 years ago when it connected us. But now it is just become like a massive tool of attention, consumption for advertising purposes.
What do you make of the things that Roger McNamee and Tristan Harris and Salesforce CEO Mark Benioff have been saying about, Facebook in this, sort of downward and negative spiral?
I think that's a little bit of it is denial of self-responsibility. I think if it is, like I felt very strongly about how Facebook was and how it was making me feel and things I was doing, I decided to get off Facebook. And it's been 6 months, haven't missed it. I think a lot of people who are talking about Facebook should be regulated because it's net negative to our society. No, before we do that, let's be self-accountable. Like, let's just decide that we as, citizens of the world will avoid going there. We will not teach our friends, family, and kids to spend more time on Facebook and its ancillary companies like Instagram. So first we should be take a positive step forward on our own behalf for us, not for regulation.
You may have more self-discipline though than, the average American. You go on trips and you leave your phone at home.
Yeah, because I was also the guy who smoked for 27 years and I almost killed myself in the process. So if it's an addiction, you have to fight it as an individual.
What about children? These are devices and services that they're going to grow up with no matter what. How do you fight that? How dangerous is it? I mean, and part of the problem is we don't really know what the impact of tech is on ourselves and our children.
I think there is no different than, parents who would put their kids in front of television and buy them pizza and, just put them in front of a screen and just say, hang out here and don't bother me. It's no different than that. I think its responsibility is good parenting. It's not addiction, it's good parenting. You knowing what your kids should be doing, where and how much, that's good parenting. I am not a parent. I haven't had kids ever, so I wouldn't know how to deal with this situation. But my only reaction to that is if you have kids and you want them to not be addicted to technology, just monitor it.
So we've talked about responsibility for ourselves, our responsibility as parents. What is the responsibility of these companies?
You should ask the CEOs of those companies. As far as I'm concerned, they will do what is their responsibility, which is make as much money for their shareholders. That is the unfortunate truth.
Do you think that what's happened with the election and the divisiveness that we see being sown by fake accounts, isn't that part of their responsibility?
Absolutely. That's fake accounts is like, you and I talked about this earlier about in November 2016. I said, these are just like spam on email. Bots are like spam on email. Why aren't these companies dealing with it like the way email providers deal with spam? And I think I still hold that statement true. It's like this is a problem of the platform and they should be fixing it.
But they're not.
They're not because, again, they want to show growth and engagement and that gets shareholders very happy.
All right. Om Malik. The dystopian view of the world.
No, it's not. That's what I was saying.
Well, it's certainly not a positive view.
It's definitely a view of the world, which sometimes is a little realistic and sounds like dystopian, but it's not. I think there is an opportunity for somebody to come along and do better than Facebook, do better than Google, do better than Twitter.
If there's room for anyone else, that's the problem.
There is always room for a new company. Remember, in 2005, we thought MySpace was going to win everything. It's 2018. It's not even a footnote in the history of technology.
All right. We'll see. Om Malik, partner at True Ventures. Always great to have you here on the show. Thanks for coming back after a while. Okay, Google Assistant will be available in more than 30 languages, including Danish, Hindi, and Thai. According to Google Vice President of Product Nick Fox, it'll now reach 95% of all eligible Android phones worldwide. Google is also working with hardware firms to build device-specific commands and develop integration with hardware-based AI chips. Coming up, the FCC braces for the next wave in the fight to repeal net neutrality. We look at what is to come. This is Bloomberg. Now to a stock we are watching. Shares of Intel jumping over 3% in trading on Friday. This comes after Reuters reported that the chipmaker failed to tell the U.S. government about the flaws known as Spectre and Meltdown. While U.S. officials have expressed concern over the massive potential backdoor flaw, Intel claims it didn't need to share that with the authorities because no one had exploited it. Now to a story we've been following, the battle over net neutrality. The FCC's vote to repeal the Obama-era internet protections has finally been published in the Federal Register. What does this mean? Well, it means the battle over net neutrality can officially begin in earnest. But before we break all that down, let's hear what the FCC commissioner had to say about this the moment when he spoke with Bloomberg at the Conservative Political Action Conference today.
When those rules are eventually officially off the books, consumers are going to continue to be protected. And this is one of the great things I think about our repeal. A lot of the public perception that's out there in the headlines is the FCC has eliminated the free and open internet. We've destroyed the internet. The truth couldn't be farther from those headlines.
For more, I want to go to D.C., where Todd Shields, who covers the FCC for Bloomberg, is standing by. So, Todd, when will these new rollback rules actually take effect?
Hi. The short answer is not for a couple of months. They were published yesterday in the Federal Register, the official record of what the agencies do here. But there are a few more steps to be taken, a little more clearance they need. So some number of months from now, maybe in the fall or late summer, we'll see the rules actually come into effect.
So what will protect consumers if ISPs take advantage of lighter regulation?
Yeah, this is a central part of the debate. As Commissioner Carr just said, the folks who backed the rules change in December, which gutted the Obama-era rules, say, what we've done is taken the FCC largely off the playing field and left enforcement to the Federal Trade Commission and to antitrust law, and that those methods are robust enough to handle any abuses. But the opponents of the rollback, the folks in favor of the old rules, say, look, the old rules had the FCC, the Federal Communications Commission, setting rules and preventing abuses rather than coming after abuses occur and attempting to correct them, and that's a more certain way and a quicker way to keep everything rolling along on the internet. I think only time will tell which side's right on this.
What's coming up then on the agenda with respect to this particular issue and Congress?
Yeah, this is interesting. The publication in the Federal Register kicks off a 60-day period when congressional Democrats can try to pass their congressional resolution of disapproval, a vote that would in essence reverse the FCC's December vote. Odds of that don't look great because while they may get the resolution through the Senate, the Republicans have a tighter lock on the House. It would, of course, need to pass both houses. Then it would need to survive presidential scrutiny, and Mr. Trump has indicated he backs the FCC's move.
So what does this mean for the big internet tech companies, the Googles and the Facebooks and these companies that have spoken out against the rollback? How much does it really matter for them?
We'll see. We'll see if traffic flows unimpeded, if they have no problems reaching customers. I know they're no fans of what the FCC did. There's a legal battle about to start. Perhaps they'll join that in earnest. It's a big question mark. We're, I would say, in uncharted territory, but defenders of the rules rollback say we're just back to where we were before that, and then there's a counter argument to that again. So it's all still a kind of a choppy battle that's going to continue in the courts, in Congress, and over at the FCC in coming years, I think.
How do you expect the legal battle to play out?
Well, we'll have, fighting briefs. There'll be a fight over the venue, which court will hear it. It'll come back to one federal appeals court. Arguments later this year, maybe. Decision first half of next year, maybe. And some people have told me, people who oppose the FCC's, what the FCC did, think that the FCC wrote a pretty strong order that might stand up because the courts tend to give deference to agencies' expert decisions. On the other hand, can the FCC persuade a court that things have changed enough in 2 years to change the rules? That's going to be the nub of the argument.
All right, Bloomberg's Todd Shields for us there. Thank you so much, Todd,
Thank you.
for that update. Coming up, YouTube hitting pause on its original programming. Why the company is slowing down spending for its streaming service. Next, this is Bloomberg. YouTube's original programming unit has hit a snag. Google is holding spending at current levels for its YouTube Red streaming service for the next 2 years. It's not an encouraging sign since both Netflix and Amazon have blockbuster budgets that are only growing. For more, I want to bring in Bloomberg's entertainment reporter, Lucas Shaw. Lucas, what does this mean?
It means that YouTube is kind of reassessing, I think, its strategy for all of its subscription services. One of the strange things about Google and YouTube in particular is that they seem to have multiple bets going on at any one time. So if you look at YouTube and paid services right now, they have Red, which is video with music and features and lots of different things. The value proposition has always been a little bit muddy. Then you have this new paid music service that they're working on, and they also have a live TV service. And my sense from speaking with a lot of people is that YouTube's putting a lot of muscle behind the live TV service. They're obviously investing resources in this music service. And so the fate of original programming is a little less clear. They're not ending it. They're just not really doubling down in the way that some of their tech peers are.
So, let's talk about it then in the context of what Amazon and Netflix are doing, only hitting the gas on spending more money on original programming. Apple as well. I mean, is this a sign that YouTube has one foot out the door?
I think it's a sign that YouTube has never had a very clear vision for what it wants to be in programming. Like Netflix knows that it wants to replace the shows it's getting from other people with shows it's making for itself. YouTube is mostly a wonderland for like other people to upload stuff. And in just 2 or 3 years, they have changed the strategy for what they're doing in originals a couple times. Or initially, it was just like all YouTube stars with their own original shows. Then it was kind of high-end hybrid shows. Now they're trying to make a Karate Kid and a Step Up, but how much money they're willing to put into a lot of shows is not so clear.
What does this mean, in the context of the overall challenges that YouTube is facing? I mean, they're under incredible pressure right now, after these conspiracy videos of David Hogg and, what's happening in the trending section, what's going on with YouTube Kids. I mean, there seems to be an inordinate amount of pressure on YouTube and, perhaps a reckoning coming with just how videos are accepted overall.
Yeah, it seems to be a new crisis for YouTube every couple weeks, and all of those point to what I view as sort of an existential problem that YouTube's going to have to resolve, which is it's okay for them to try to say, what other people upload is not our problem if they are themselves not a programmer and a curator. If they're just this neutral place that people put stuff, they have an argument, whether you want to believe it or not, to say that this is not our doing. But when you're also funding shows and deciding what's trending and deciding what is good and what is good and bad, there's this conflict between being a media company and being a tech company. And Google has obviously always been a tech company, and it's kind of flirted with being a media company, but it's never really committed to it.
I want to make a pivot to Black Panther, and you've been tweeting about the film. Obviously, the numbers have been incredibly promising. Where do you see this franchise going? Because now it's about what's next.
Yeah, I mean, look, the potential is limitless. You have to imagine that when a movie is one of the 5 biggest openings of all time, that they're going to they're going to do a sequel one way or another. I had seen that maybe they don't have the director locked in. I have to imagine that Chadwick Boseman is locked in. Marvel tends to do these deals where they sign you up for like 4 or 5 movies. So Black Panther appeared in an earlier Marvel movie. He'll probably come back in I think the Avengers Infinity War opens in May, and then they'll try and line up a sequel. I mean, this has been a big enough deal that Bob Iger, the CEO of Disney, tweeted about it on Monday or Tuesday. He doesn't tweet an awful lot.
Obviously, I think there's such a fascinating story here when it comes to diversity behind and in front of the camera in the middle of the Me Too movement that has been exploding Hollywood. Do you see a real inflection point right now, just in terms of who's making movies and how characters, especially women and minorities, are portrayed? Or is that going to be a much longer haul?
It's going to be a longer haul. There's an inflection in the conversation where you have people jumping on the success of Wonder Woman and Black Panther to say, why haven't you been doing this earlier and more often? It's kind of crazy that at this point we have to talk about it being a big deal that you have, a blockbuster movie with a black protagonist or with a female protagonist. This should be the norm. Whether that's going to get institutionalized in Hollywood will really come down to whether they give more shots over and over again, because what you hear most often from female directors, from directors of color, is that they'll have a big success, but if the next one doesn't work, then they immediately get pushed aside in a way that doesn't happen to their white male colleagues. And so for there to be continued evolution and success for minority filmmakers, there needs to be a commitment on the part of Hollywood that we'll see play out over the next few years, not just in the next couple months.
All right, Lucas Shaw for us there in LA. Lucas, as always, great to have you on the show. Thank you. Now, in deal news, Momo is solidifying its dominance in the Chinese world of online dating. Momo is buying its smaller, Tinder-like rival, Tantan, for $601 million in cash and $5.3 million in newly issued shares. China's worsening male-female ratio has spurred an explosion in online dating. Momo had nearly 95 million active users in the September quarter, while Tantan claims it has brokered more than 3 billion matches online. And that does it for this edition of Bloomberg Technology. A reminder, we're live streaming on Twitter. Check us out at Technology, weekdays 5 p.m. in New York, 2 p.m. in San Francisco. That's all for now. This is Bloomberg.